Glad to see everybody here, and I'm excited tonight to have William O'Daly with us, a poet, a translator, a publisher, and has worn many hats throughout his career. So I'll start out by reading a bio of Bill. William O'Daly was raised in the San Fernando Valley and frequented the backpacking trails of the Southern Sierra Nevada. He attended the University of California, Santa Barbara as an economics major, but before the end of his freshman year, turned to literature and the writing of poetry. At UCSB, he studied with poets Kenneth Rexroth, Alan Stevens, Frederick Turner, and John Ridlin, and with modernist critic Hugh Kenner. Under friend and mentor Sam Hamill, he served as assistant editor of Spectrum magazine. In 1972, he left UCSB for Denver, Colorado, where he co-founded Copper Canyon Press. His published works include 8 books of translation of the late career and posthumous poetry of Chilean Nobel laureate Pablo Neruda, and Neruda's first volume, Book of Twilight, all published by Copper Canyon. Book of Twilight was a finalist for the Northern California Book Award in Translation of Poetry for 2018. Books of his own poems include The Whale in the Web, Copper Canyon, as well as Yarrow and Smoke, Waterways, a collaboration with J.S. Graustein, and The Road to Isla Negra, the latter 3 published by Folded Word Press. He was profiled by NBC News correspondent Mike Leonard for The Today Show as a finalist for the 2006 Quill Award in Poetry, recognized by the National Endowment for the Arts as a fellow. His poems, translations, essays, and reviews have been published in a wide range of journals and anthologies. With co-author Han Ping Chin, he wrote a historical novel, This Earthly Life, set amid the fascinating and deadly Chinese Cultural Revolution. This Earthly Life was selected a finalist in Narrative Magazine's 2009 Fall Story Contest. Currently residing in the Sierra foothills of Northern California, he has worked as a college professor, a literary and technical editor and writer, and instructional designer, and he has received national and regional honors for literary editing and structural design. In 2016, he was recognized by the state of California for his contributions to the California Water Plan. He's had a wide, varied career in life, and I'm looking forward to talking to him tonight. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much, Brad. It's great to be here.
So I'd like to begin with a question. You know, what poem, essay, book, just piece of writing changed everything for you as a younger person?
Well, there was actually kind of a triumvirate of books. As a freshman at UC Santa Barbara, I went into the bookstore one day and I was getting interested in poetry and writing a little bit of it. And I found Residencia en la Tierra by Pablo Neruda, Residence on Earth. And I'd never read anything like that. A mixture of groundedness and surrealness and great passion, beautifully crafted. I had some Spanish then, have a lot more of it now. But anyway, reading through that, especially I explain a few things, the poem, I explain a few things, grabbed me by the shirt and hooked me pretty well. Kenneth Rexroth's shorter poems, particularly The Signature of All Things, that was the same afternoon in the bookstore. I picked that up and had no idea at that moment that Rexroth actually taught at UCSB. He later became a mentor in the next few years. And then about my sophomore year, I guess, the following year, I was still struggling. How do you read poetry and all of that? And I was skipping class a lot more often and reading poetry. And it's a path I don't recommend, but I took it. And one afternoon, I was reading Garcia Lorca's Sonambula Ballad, Romance Sonambulo, in Spanish and English, going back and forth. And I had this insight, this bright flash. I say, hey, you don't figure out poems, you dance with them. And that realization was huge for me. And so, I've taught from that position, that place of understanding. I write from that place of understanding where I dance with my emotional constellation at the time, ideas I'm having, and some far off horizon where I don't really see the end of the poem, or I do, but how to get there is a whole other matter that I can only achieve. I can only take that journey in a mode of dance,
Hmm.
as I would say.
Before I have you read, I want to ask you a little bit more about your entry into the work of Pablo Neruda. And I liked how you used the word to grab you by the shirt. Can you say more about sort of why his words, more than anyone else writing, at that time or before, sort of grabbed you by the shirt, and what you mean by that?
Well, I had only read anthologies of English language poetry before that. I hadn't read anything from South America or Central America. And there was something about the music of the Spanish, the original Spanish, that I just felt totally simpatico with it. I love, for my 2 cents, Spanish is the language of poetry.
Mm.
Its sounds and its cadences, how you can work your cadences. But Neruda himself, actually, it was years later, after I think my third or fourth Neruda translation, Copper Canyon published, that a good friend of mine said, well, it's not surprising to me that you've spent much of your life translating Neruda to this point. You share a sensibility. You share a way of looking at the world. And I think that's really true. I think I found mi hermano from Chile, there was a brotherhood there almost right away. And I have a hard time describing it beyond then, but the reason I did all the late and posthumous work that I felt strongly about was because that wasn't represented in English yet. A couple poems here and there in anthologies. And I really loved the wisdom that Neruda had attained late in life.
Mm.
So the books that I translated run from early 1968 right to his death in 1973. Seeing the Bells was the last book on his desk. He didn't even have time to title the poems. But the poems themselves, I feel, and scholars agree, were finished. So he just had to title them, and he only got a third of them done before he died. So, but it's that wisdom and that way of looking at the world and the tenderness, and there's no verbal pyrotechnics,
Uh-huh.
Which Residencia, of course, exhibits beautifully. It's just very straightforward. And so
Yeah.
that suited me as well.
I need to get you reading, but I do want to ask a follow-up. I mean, given that time was a very political, hot time in the U.S., and that Neruda was, in some ways, as tender as he was a very political, person. So was there some nexus there too with how he spoke to you at that time, that period of time?
Actually, that's a great question, Brad. Absolutely. I spent the last few days of my freshman year at UC Santa Barbara in the Santa Barbara County Jail, being arrested. 300 and some of us, 25 of us, 26 of us, I think they counted, flooded a park because the Santa Barbara sheriffs and police and the LA tax squad were wreaking havoc on peaceful demonstrations. And so they were arresting people for no reason at all. They were abusing people. Some of these police, they look at these middle-class kids, mostly middle-class kids at this university and thinking we're not grateful. We're not, we've been given so much, but here we are in this playground of ours, from their point of view.
Mm.
And so we made a plan to get arrested. You know, we sat in the park after curfew and we're all arrested for 3 charges. One of us was arrested for, well, actually 10 of us were arrested for felonies, but the rest of it was failure to disperse, illegal assembly, curfew. And then we spent 3 days, many of us, 3 days in jail. And this was 1970, spring of 1970. And so that was an activist about halfway through my freshman year, culminating in that arrest. And then I remained in it. For me, I think another reason I'm fairly simpatico with South American and Central American poetry is there's a social commitment involved for many, many of the poets there, a social political commitment. And Cuba as well. And I see it all as one thing. I know it's really important as a poet to write poetry. That's our main function. Translate it. That's sort of a public service, civil service. But also I see justice, fairness, like most left-wingers, as being very prominent values that we have to uphold. And if we do, that tends to right the ship of other issues. And of course, Neruda, he was tender, yes, and he was political, but he was also empathetic. And that's what makes the politics work for me.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Tell me what would you like to start reading tonight?
Well, I think I'll be reading mostly, I'll read one Neruda translation and another translation that was just published by a Panamanian poet, Bertalicia Peralta. But I'm going to primarily read from a manuscript that I think I finally have in final form called The New Gods. And some of these poems were published in the chapbook she mentioned, one that came out after the bio, Yarrow and Smoke from Folded Word. And, but nearly all of them will be from this manuscript. And I think I'd like to start with the epigraph to the manuscript to give context.
Great, look forward, yes.
What is it the new gods seek? Destruction or children, combustion or love? The mirror denies everything, possessed of a faith that is not faith. Like amber, the dream is true. It will keep you whole when you leap in, when you die out. And a number of these poems, especially in the first half of the reading, will be focusing on children, what's happening right now in our country and much of the world has me extremely concerned, not so much even for us, more adult folks, but for what we leave behind. But this first poem, A Summer Prayer, sort of an enactment of a belief I have that to truly write a poem, you have to first embody it, and then you find it within yourself. And this was brought home by a friend of mine who wrote to me one day about her afternoon in a river and how that felt, and my own experience here locally in the American River. It's about 10 minutes away. A Summer Prayer. Evening mist settles on the blackened and blasted boulders at the confluence. The river psalm incanting the flesh of the spirit, the dance of the extinct. Acorns ground in the bedrock holes. The canyon oaks ring with the thunder, the sinew of a first breath. I plunge into a bitter pool of the North Fork. My pulse quickens. A single thought escapes like that. Blood departs the arms and legs for the heart. Inner tides release uncertainty to the extremities, the longing that flares out of reach. The river is choreographing how we change, how we abide when the current takes us. In the dusk, I will stroke hard toward the bank and rise like an icy moon along the forgotten path.
Hmm.
This second poem I've been doing almost every year for the last several years, at least every other year. I've been participating in an event at the Sacramento Fine Arts Center where 6 poets choose two paintings in an exhibit at the center. Then we have 2 weeks to write one poem each to those 2 paintings. And then, excuse me, previously, we sent those poems to the Dave Brubeck Jazz Quintet at UOP, University of Pacific, and they would write the music, and then we would rehearse, and then we would put on a performance with the band as we read, and then the painting would be projected above us, above the stage on a large screen. It's a wonderful event. I'm doing it again in February, can't wait. This is where this poem comes from, one of those paintings. Christian's Animal. When you stare at me, do you see yourself? Eyes of porphyry. Perhaps I could be your animal spirit and roam the playa and the stars. Built to last, ready to move on, I climb the misty pinnacles of Guanji. Older than my age, among the Araucaria of the lower Andes, I am patient as 10,000 years, waiting to see the canyons of Coconino County, where surely my memory will grow deeper. I will be river or mountain, a galaxy that moves according to gravity, to necessity, to natural numbers and scent. Most days I do my chores, but now I want to go outside and wave to the seven dancing children moving across the night. I pray that one day they will return and be what we no longer take for granted. A mourning dove enters a mine shaft, and I join hands with the lost, afraid of becoming what I am not. I kiss the darkness that knows I am not ready. The more I love, the stronger I become.
Thank you, Bill. I want to follow up on something you said on introduction to one of those poems about your process and feeling you need to embody the words before you make sense of it or something like that. Can you talk more about that process and embodied feeling that leads to a poem?
For me, Brad, what that means is actually the experience needs to be embodied, needs to be integrated. And it's not something, it's a bit mysterious to me. I don't understand the full process. It's more akin to feeling various phases. So sometimes I'll get the cadence or rhythm of a poem before I get a word of it. I'll feel this cadence or this rhythm. Lines will start to come. And when that's not worked, when poems have not come to fruition that I have felt that way about, my feeling is that I haven't fully integrated the experience of that poem, what that poem is trying to constellate, as fully as I need to. But overwhelmingly, it's very intuitive. It's not something I could describe A, B, then we go to C. It's really about the way music, what lives in the body. Music's mathematical. It's improvisational. We do covers of the same lyrics, same song. But all of those require that we understand the piece emotionally and intuitively, but yet do not yet know the full mystery of it or what it exactly is. So poems are perfect from my point of view for rendering these experiences because, again, poems ask more questions than they answer. Yeah,
Does
which is, I think,
anything quicken that integration process, or is it something that just has its own time? I mean, does spending time in nature, does listening to music, or is it just sort of its own thing, and you have to respect that process?
largely, I think it's a matter of respecting the process, being patient, waiting, and really listening internally, feeling internally, but also, um, doing what I can. I've always been intuitive. I'm an intuitive person. I've been told that by friends, and so it might, this is just something that's very personal to me, and but also, then I'll have a ritual.
Mhm.
A really wonderful poet, Bill Ransom, once told me that his ritual, he swept his floors before he sat down to write poems. And the result was very clean floors and opening a doorway to the imagination
Mm.
through this ritual. It's like raking the sand in a Japanese garden.
Mhm.
So there's that. Before I used to, for two books of Neruda's, which I worked on at the library at University of Oregon, I would walking to the library, I passed through the cemetery on campus. And I started sort of chanting, because no one was ever there. Neruda, Neruda. And I would just do this. And one day I was doing that, and there was a large, tall tombstone. And I didn't see two people who were rounding it as I was coming the other way. And there I am chanting Neruda. And I said, well, they looked at me like, who are you looking for? And I said, my friend Pablo. Have you seen Pablo? He looked at me like I was out of my mind. And I just kept walking. But generally, it's a very private process.
Well, I know we on Friday we lost a great travel writer, and I know travel is dear to you and has inspired much of your writing and also your work with translation. We lost Jan Morris, and can you talk a little bit about rendering place and words, and what place, how place inspires your work, both poetry and translation?
Well, that is another connection with Neruda. Of course, poems of place, the natural world. When I was living in the San Joaquin Valley in the 70s, a landscape actually kind of alien to me because I was from LA originally. I started to write at the end of my first year there, write productively. Just letting that land, that agricultural landscape and the rivers and canals just seep up through the bottom of my feet. And I began to understand the culture there, the agricultural farming culture and ranching culture. And they kind of met. Understanding the culture, excuse me, allowed me to understand the people who had come into my life through my wife at the time, primarily, and connecting with them, having that understanding I didn't have when I first got there, connecting myself to the land, that just snowballed. And then I felt there were poems that dealt with environmental justice, economic justice. I had a friend there, name was Catfish, lived down the street in a shed near the Tuolumne River. We would go catfishing at midnight down by the river and never say a word. And it was very much, it was just a new life. But it took me a while to actually start rendering it in poetry. But that's been true of everywhere I've lived, where the land just seems to seep into my pores, but not without understanding what I can of the people and culture.
Okay. Well, would you read some more for us, please?
Sure, sure. Actually, let's see. This is a poem for my daughter, Kira. She came home from her first year of junior high one day, and she was taking saxophone, had to take an instrument. And this is getting to the intuitive part of us. She said, "Hey, look, Mom and Dad, look, I can put my saxophone together." She could assemble it. And she said, "Do you want to hear my two notes?" And I went, "I'd love to hear your two notes." So she played those two notes, and she played them again. This is a tenor sax. And then she just took off. Now she's had 2 lessons, but not being inhibited, up here and somehow being very connected to this instrument that she had played for a very little amount of time, she just started riffing and I almost fell over. I couldn't believe it. It was so good. She just went with her heart. That informs this poem. She's always been an asker of questions, and she asked the big ones. We were on our way to my brother's house for Thanksgiving, and we were topping the Coast Range on our way down to Half Moon Bay, and these questions started to emerge. Last thing I'll say is she also, at that time, was really into math. That's the constellation. Mysterious figure. Is God a girl? You ask as we climb the Coast Range. Your taste for iron and salt expanding beyond your 1,875th day. Do numbers go forever? Our small car rounds a curve and catches sight of the shimmering sea. If numbers keep going, there must be a day, Itty. You say it that way. Your cheeks the color of apricots, beautiful mind hungry as one bee. No cloud, no chord, no stone, no poem will ever be like yours. Today, mysterious figure we never dreamed, you blow on your alto saxophone lonely numerals with love, numbers that have no other. Let the tender hands of the clock turn the pages and raise your family of notes. Life moves with sweet intensity, blossoms geometrically as your fingers discover twilight. We blow a kiss to the mystery of who you are, and our lips touch infinity, this small world. You play the wind, listen for the rain, and take flight with the ferocity of one drawn to song, sculpting your own Greek isle. With each breath, you seek a heaven that has no need of honey.
Nice. Please keep reading, yes.
Okay, let's see. One year I taught in the Poets and Artists in the Schools program in Montana. I had taught in Missoula earlier in the year. And I'd gotten back from a 3-week trip. It was toward the end of the worst winter since 1897. And I was pretty, fragmented. just driving around that state in winter. And I was really tired. Spent a couple days at my cabin, which is 20 miles east of Missoula on Rock Creek, just decompressing, and then had friends out for pizza and beer. And then we all went to Missoula to listen to a reading. And I went to friends' houses after the reading, checked in, got back home to cabin about 1 a.m. And it was burning down, make a long story short. So one of the poets and a friend of mine in Missoula took me in so I could finish my contract with the state. Someone had left a cigarette burning in the carpet. And I was walking down the street one day, and there were these kids on these bicycles, and I had taught them earlier in the year. And we had this conversation that I just couldn't believe. And this is part of it, that I've abstracted just a little. It's called Come Out of the House. There's an epigraph: they will say you are on the wrong road, if it is your own. Antonio Porgia. Before the house burns down, open your eyes to the rain and the owl. In the plaza, a soldier is smoking. The elm puts on new leaves. My daddy doesn't want me to be any artist, not even a rancher like him. His sweat goes to deadbeats, like the cattle in the songs. I still have that part of me, fire transformed. Is it wrong for a man to cry at 3 in the afternoon? Poet, don't you know? Fire makes you young, gives you something real to fear. In my pocket, I carry the jawbone of an ass. I learn virtue, planting myself among the delphinium. Poet, feel the flames at your feet. Feel this ground like water in the earth. Spring is demolishing the dead. Wrapping myself in the sun's ribbons, I am learning to be young, delirious among the ruins at 3 in the afternoon. Why do you keep fighting, poet? Sharing pain and joy in difficult times. Is it the ashes collecting on your teeth? Why are so few born at 3 in the afternoon? Why do I die? Are words bitter seed or fierce anemone? Weapons or prayers? Poet, what is your favorite color of kite? Why are words never what they seem? Falling eyes, rising mouths, charging bowls or smoke. Will you remain on earth or flee like a lost river, an archaeologist chasing the stars?
Thank you. As I mentioned in the bio, you co-founded Copper Canyon Press, and it's such an influential press throughout the last few decades. And can you talk about how that experience as a younger man still lives inside you and maybe inside your work?
Well, that's another great question, Brad. Copper Canyon Press came about in part from a betrayal of the university. Sam Hamill and I were editing Spectrum magazine for the university. We published one blockbuster issue, aggregating all the money for 3 issues for a single year, putting them in one issue. And we had a bunch of top flying poets, new poets, emerging poets. And we were walking across the campus one day, and this journalist came up to us and said, "Hey, you guys, did you hear? Congratulations." And we look at each other, don't know what he's talking about. And he goes, "Oh, you don't know? Well, you've just won the best college magazine in the nation award from the CCLM for Spectrum. We're looking at each other and we're going, uh-oh. And he goes, yeah, how can you not know this? Well, this English department, the administration of the English department, leadership at that time, actually tried to get the CCLM to issue the check to the English department. It was actually for the editor, and Sam was the editor-in-chief. I was the assistant editor for that issue, and we were pretty much the entire staff. We were the entire staff. And that betrayal, and that, Sam's on the GI Bill, I have no money at all. And so we had been talking about starting a press, late night, reading poems to each other and a few other folks, and talked about what it would be like to start a poetry publishing press, but who knows when, So this coalesced all of that. There was the reading of poems to each other, usually other people's poems, not our own. And then there was we need to do something about this. We need to make our mark. And there are certain aesthetic criteria that we have, and we know what they are. And we were different people, different poets, different thinkers, but we shared a great deal in that respect. And so after that, Sam and a friend of ours, Jim Gottney, got in Jim's Triumph TR4. He had just gotten $500, Jim did, from his mother who owned a mattress factory in LA and was doing really well. And just out of the blue sent him $500. Jim was kind of a ne'er-do-well at that time. He had no money either. And we got $500 from the CCLM for the magazine. So we had $1,000. I stayed behind, sold Sam's panel truck for $250 to a friend of mine. And we all congregated in the new year. This is 1972, in Denver. And it was kind of the way that came together. I was in my fall quarter of my senior year, finished the quarter and left. My parents were not happy. And, Sam and Tree Swenson did the same thing. She finished her quarter and headed out, and we all met there. And it was a very, very, very tough first year. I got there with $100 in my pocket and paid the rent because we were about to get kicked out. Sam and Jim had gotten an apartment. And after all that, within a couple of weeks, I had 83 cents in my pocket. That's all I had, no job, nothing. And 3 weeks later, I went to make a phone call at a payphone, and I had a total of 17 cents. And I looked at it, and this is all I have in the world. And my first question to myself, where did it all go? I had 83 cents. And I'm not kidding. And then I realized the pattern of my thinking, and I realized, dude, you're in this for the long haul. You're committed. You've built this aesthetic up. You're here with friends who have the same commitment. And so, I got a job in a bookstore. Tree got a job in an art supplies store. Sam was working at a book distributor. And Jim was our pressman. So we spent all our money, everything but rent and Kraft macaroni and cheese money. I can't even look at it to this day, Kraft macaroni and cheese. And we bought letterpress equipment, an office multi-lift 1000 machine, and we lived in this tenement apartment, and we just kept going and kept going and kept going till that first book came out. Gerald Costanzo's Badlands. And that's when I didn't decide, I'm going to commit myself to this and this is going to be my life. Dang it. It was far more organic. And I had never committed myself to anything like that before at that level. So that's what I realized who I was.
Yeah.
In that respect.
Wonderful story. Thank you for that. Would you read some more for us, please?
Certainly, certainly. Let's see. Let's do one more with the children. When I was growing up, I've had this thing like people say they're old, people say they're young. They feel bad if they're old, they feel good if they're young. That's supposed to be a good thing. But on my small street, when I was a kid, we had one 12-year-old friend, Carolyn, who had a terminal disease. At age 12, she decided she didn't want any more treatment. She just wanted to die. And her parents honored that. Another friend caught valley fever in an underground fort we had built, and he almost died. And another friend down the other way, down the block, was very sickly, and he died while I was living in Seattle in the very late 80s, way too young. And so watching this, the whole idea of being young, old, we're all vulnerable. We don't know what's in front of us. And so for that reason, I'll put it this way, this poem kind of embodies that view of the world. And again, my concern for how we're setting up our children right now in this country with everything from climate change to what's a fact? The lives of the children. And the epigraph is, the cloud is free only to go with the wind. The rain is free only in falling. Wendell Berry. Born to lightning, we reaped love and warp, returned to the empty lot, to the advent of democracy. We dug a fortress, burrowed under an orange tree, exposed the roots and inhaled the incense of worm. Our lives hid among ghosts, took shelter with dirty magazines, tied by a string and buried there. Pigeons scatter, children flee the cupola in their wings, bearing mea culpas on their backs. In street and meadow, mountain and tower, they climb the ladder of heaven, never again to be warrior or angel. One caught valley fever, another returned to the womb and drowned. Others let go because they'd had enough, too much misery or bliss. Others were lost in the marshes of Vietnam, or at the end of a defibrillated neighborhood. Separate, apart, each of the other, we are a single attraction, a resistance, a theft, a map of plunder and relief. In the fullness of your arms, we join the exiled and the wind. Afraid to look, may we seek, dark angel, the favor of your eyes. And now we get overtly political.
Yes, please.
Just a moment here. This is Writing for Peace.
That's right.
The flag is burning. We, friend, are the body of the country, burning in the street. Eyes open against the sky, the child running, the mother on her knees, reaching for the soldier aiming, the village on fire, the sword grieving, the shrapnel-littered ruins of the hanging gardens of Providence and Cheyenne, the snow falling over the blistered arroyo in an ashen dance, the stars surrendering white over Pierre, the rain penetrating the prairie, the clothes and walls and pillows spattered crimson, the steeples congregating in a phosphorus sky, claiming God's bidding. We are the tombs of brothers and uncles who send our sons and daughters into battle. In the Senate and the woodshed, our ties smoldering like oil slicks. Conviction flourishing like ivy, fueled by our breath. We are the flag and the heart from which it was sown. We are the dead who gather, burning in the child's mind, the longing that congregates and cries out, never again.
I came across a quote, a Neruda quote this past week about, I don't have it in front of me, but the essence of it was that writing poetry and doing creative work and assuming you're writing for all of perpetuity and going to have a long legacy is kind of delusional. He said, I think his point was something about writing in this moment and embracing the politics of this moment as well. Is that something that speaks to you? And maybe even know that quote. I don't know.
I do know the quote, Brad. I can't
Yeah.
give it to you this moment verbatim. But yeah, that was his way. Neruda, when he was a young man in Santiago, Chile, got there when he was age 16. It took him a long time to kind of figure out that he was famous. He got famous rather quickly, at least in the city. And he kind of just blew it off. He didn't quite get it. And there's this image of Neruda as someone who was rather egotistical in some circles and unapproachable. But he said very clearly, the poet isn't a priest. We're human beings. That was literal. We're human beings. We have a job to do. And we're really, his view of it was largely, although he tended to be rather grand at times, one of a public service. I'm a public servant in my day job, Department of Water Resources, the California Department of Water Resources. It comes really naturally to me. I've taught for 12, 14 years in higher ed and poets in the schools and stuff. And I feel best when I'm somehow serving. That's how I feel as a poet. I feel good if a poem I write on Monday lasts through Friday. I really, according to one of my friends, Sean Griffin, I'm one of the very few poets he knows who have taken the narrow road to the interior, meaning very long. And I would agree. But, I see, there's so many wonderful poets in this country and in many countries. But careerism is one of those things that, the business of poetry is to get books in people's hands. You have to do the business, you have to promote, you have to give readings, you have to post on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you do. But you can't live there as a poet. And Neruda actually spoke about that a lot. When careerism becomes your raison d'etre, poetry dies. It gets manufactured, gets contrived. And if you're very skillful, it can look pretty good, but often doesn't last. And that's really what he was referring to.
Would Neruda be posting on Instagram today? Would he be using that format, or what do you think?
Well, as far as I know, he never even drove a car. He was always driven. I don't think he once got behind a wheel of a car, literally. So, but if he's part of this milieu,
Yeah.
Probably because he loved to connect with people. He was very people oriented, even though he was very shy, even timid at times. There's all of this fits together in that large body of his, you know. All of these were very important, very real parts of him. But he was very people oriented as well. And so I bet you he'd be on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
I bet.
Cool. Would you end tonight with another poem?
Sure. Let's see. If I'm going to read one more, which one is it going to be? How much time do we have?
We have 7 minutes.
Okay. Maybe what I'll do.
We're not too keen on real close time, so read what you feel inspired to read.
Okay, Brad. Well, I'll forego the two translations I was going to read. This is the most recent Neruda book. Promotion. Book of Twilight. This was his very first book. He was 19 when he published it in Santiago, 3 years after he got there. This book, Resistencia, Poems of Protest and Revolution. I have one poem in here. Again, the Panamanian poet, Bartolicia Peralta. This is a fabulous book. Just Tin House released it this fall. It's edited by Mark Eisner and Tina Escaja, and it is something. Excellent selection from Central and South America, Cuba. So I'll put those aside, and what I'll do, since I might go a couple minutes over, is read a poem for Neruda. It's called For Neruda. Let's see. And, for the first, 7, 8 books of Neruda's I translated. I never wrote anything for him, didn't try and imitate him. I went to Chile in 2008, came back, wrote the introduction to my final late posthumous book, World's End. And then I started imitating. Then I felt free to imitate and be respectful. This poem grew out of that. And a lot of the poem has to do with his exile in the late 40s and early 50s from Chile, when he called González Videla, the president of Chile, a jackal in the Senate. And he had to go into hiding, spent a year in Chile hiding with his wife, Delia de Carril at the time, and then headed to Argentina, went over the Andes, and then to Europe and Russia and various places, Soviet Union. So that's what a lot of this is, and it also deals with the Pinochet coup and the aftermath of that. The name Victor is Victor Jara, the great folklorist and stage director, was a good friend of his. For Neruda. Ride your pale horse through the meadow tonight, among the black skirts of the sky. Bring into your hands the exiled light, the litanies of broken glass and bone. We will hide you in the flower garden, in the closet when the police close in. You will lie under a blanket in the back seat of the sedan headed south, and later climb into the Andes, your typewriter stuffed in a saddlebag. As your exposed heart opens to the waterfall, to the river of shattered hands, your 2 vaquero guides will roll their eyes. On reaching the pass, you will barely notice the goats perched above, unmoving, staring at you, stripped down to the man you are, who no longer searches for his scars, his country, artifacts, women, the daughter who died in the house of flowers, the brother buried at night, where farmers still dig for water. Pablo, tie your horse to the night. Sit with me in the lost city, on a patio ringed by geraniums and the cosmos. Before the dawn arrests our sense of beauty. In an hour, the river will run with the color of blood. You will listen for green rain falling through the dense kilometers. Speak to snow in the mountains. Discover gratitude in the fields, where women search a shard of bone, the back of a skull, empty as a womb, a foot still in its shoe. The youngest son preserved in the dry earth, where politicians hide their silences, their words, their money belts, gunpowder and disease. Let me pour you sparkling wine stirred with the juice of pomegranates. Offer handfuls of mountain blueberries, a ladle brimming with olive oil to drizzle over onion and tomato on crusty bread. Then a poem of friendship, some woolen socks, the bonfire, and a guitar. Ride your weary horse from the assaulted coast. Rest on beds of Mexican salvia, African daisies, delphinium, where the Greek gods wrote love letters to the creatures who save us from ourselves. What can we say to the ruined star? Brother of my breath, how can we sing, any of us? How will we remember to live for nothing? How are we to laugh as we scatter petals over your ashes? I never saw you cry, but do my best to let your words weep. To play simply, to flow like the blood of the children, to sweat the gifts of the body and presume the soul. Ride your horse where the dead and the living rise from their graves. Witness the tombs opening, the vertical stones falling, the guiding eye colliding with vision and belief. Around us, in the churches and the mosques, the innocent are falling, praying lavishly and alone. The river carries us, succumbs to concrete and steel. The words you shouted for beautiful Victor on your deathbed, the taunts as he died at the hands of the torturers. Words so brutal, so ugly, they take the breath away. Thousands are leaving their apartments and entering La Avenida de la Paz, lined by Chile's own Guardia Civil. Machine guns and batons, but no one gives a damn. Thousands join the procession to the general cemetery, scattering flowers over your casket. An eagle passes over and turns toward the coast, heading perhaps for an empty nest. We all have arrived, the living and the dead, shouting, Pablo Neruda, presente. Return to Isla Negra. Matilde will warm a meal. In the splendor, empty bottles and poems like roots will wash up on the shore, returning all you have given. Conspire with me among the hills, the black oak and the vines. Let me plant a kiss of salt on your forehead. Let us free ourselves, and with a single throat, praise the summer grass. Keep time with the dancer who flares in the first dark hour before the Perseids streak across the emptiness.
Wow. What a wonderful, vivid ending for us here, end note.
Thank you.
Bill, this has been a wonderful evening. Thanks for sharing your stories and your words. Really moved by it all. And I could sit here another hour. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Brad. I really enjoyed it. And thank you, Carmel and Juniper, for your organizational abilities and efforts, and for everyone who joined us tonight. I see a few familiar faces.
Can you unmute us all and mute everybody, Juniper? Great. If anyone wants to say a word don't really have time for a long question, but it'd be lovely to say hi to Bill. Some friends of his are here tonight. So again, thank you so much. So moving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juniper, for being here again. She's behind the scenes and really organizational in so many ways and keeps us going. So thank you, Juniper.
You're welcome. Everybody has the ability to unmute themselves. And I tried to research it, William, but what is the book you referred to with the South American poets in it? Was it Residencia?
The Residencia en la Tierra was Neruda's book.
Oh, okay.
This is the anthology I was referring to.
Hold it up.
Resistencia.
Yeah, perfect.
Hold it longer. Hold it up longer.
Hold it up longer, she said.
Oh, hold it up longer.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
What a beautiful cover, yeah.
Protest and Revolution. Okay.
Yeah, it's, Tin House Books was the publisher. And I highly recommend, there's bios from all the poets and all the poet translators as well. It's quite a diverse selection as coming from all these different countries. It's a great intro.
And who's the editor? Is it you?
No, it's Mark Eisner and Tina Escaja are the editors.
Mark Eisner?
Mark Eisner, it's Eisner.
That was the easy one. What's the second one?
Tina Escaja, Escaja.
Well, wonderful. Well, good night, everybody. And I will look forward to seeing you. We're here weekly all winter long and through the pandemic. We hope it's all over soon. And I know it's getting hard out there. Stay with us and stay safe and stay healthy. And many thanks for being here. So good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Sir.
Thanks, Brad.
Good night. Good night. Love
Good
you
night.
so much.
Take
Night,
care,
Bill.
everyone.
Thank you.
Oh boy.
Next week, we have Cynthia Atkins on December 6th. For those of you who are still around. Yes. Good night.
We're all starting to leave.
Yeah, that's okay. It's good to see you, Garrett.
It's good to see you, Juniper.
Garrett.
Good to see you, Bill.
Good to see you.
Juniper let me know via Instagram that you were doing this tonight, and of course I hopped on the chance to do this.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
So it's quite a bit of a difference to see you and hear you, and not just be typing through the computer for a change. So that's a nice change.
Well, likewise, Garrett, and
Thank you.
that much closer to actually meeting you in person someday.
I know. I was going to say our factors of shrinking the world. They shrunk by a couple factors tonight. So that's again a nice change. But
We'll take a say hello to Sabrina.
I will, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, she just has a couple more days of her clinicals left, so she'll be back here, and I won't be a bachelor here all by myself in our apartment anymore, so yeah. Thank you very much.
You both take good care.
And I'll be in touch with you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Good to see you. Will this recording be available?
Yes, it will. It should be posted either Monday or Tuesday at the Writing for Peace Sunday Live section of the website. Yes.
Excellent. Thanks. This was really, thanks for emailing me one.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, you guys.
Good night, William.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
And give Tara a pet for me, Juniper.
I will. She's right behind me chewing her bone.
She's probably somewhere on the couch. All right. Night, you
Take
guys.
good care.
Care.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.